Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got a kablooey of a St. Louis kind of show lined up for you. Lara Teeter from Webster University has been a friend of MTCA for a long time, and we are so glad to finally have him on the show. Today, we talked about the actor-first mentality of Webster and how the acting and musical theater majors interact. We talked about the combines of Webster, at least I call them the combines, in terms of how they level the dancing and help the singing training at the beginning of their training there. We talk about the advice of having a life out of the side of the theater program and how there's sort of a catch-22 and how difficult that is in a conservatory environment, but also how important it is. We talk about getting to know a student in the audition versus just the essence of a perfect performer, how important it is to them that they really get to know their students. We talk about some red flags in auditions and needing to take adjustments, some attitude issues, and if a student were to make it all about themselves. And then Lara references Blink, one of my favorite books, when we talk about how he accepts or doesn't accept certain students. But before we get to Lara, Meghan, what a time of year it is.
I know. It's a busy decision-making research time for our students. And I just wanted to say that we've been noticing a little uptick of our downloads for the upcoming months, or past months, I should say. And I do think it has something to do with our students making decisions on what schools they potentially want to go to. And I encourage our MTCA students or our current podcast listeners, if you know somebody else who's going through the process, feel free to share those episodes. Have them speed dating around our podcast and all the colleges around.
We'll be in an open relationship with these students with their podcast. Please, why not? I just want to add in first, I'm so proud of all the students in the year that it's been, what a difficult year it's been getting through it. And just sending so much love to those of you who are going through that decision. Many, I know, of our MTCA students have multiple great options, which is like so exciting. That's the goal of going through this process. But then they're going to have to take some real time to consider. And you can make all the pro-con list, and we've suggested, and of course you better go visit those schools, and you should take some classes and all the things that we tell our MTCA students to do. But then at the end of the day, you also have to go with your gut. You have to feel like this feels like the right decision for me. And then, you're going to take the leap, a little bit like we said with JB, of you're going to build that parachute over the course of those 4 years after you go, here we go. This feels right to me.
Yeah.
Meghan, how did you make that decision when you were narrowing down? I know you had a number of great options.
Yeah, I did. I was lucky to have a few options to choose from. I knew that Baldwin Wallace was on the top of my list from when I was starting out. My parents forced me to go on the college tour before auditioning. And I was like, Mom, why am I going to all these schools when I don't know if I'm going to go get in? But I will say the positive that came out of that experience is that I was able to tour Baldwin Wallace, and you get that feeling. You're like, oh, this could be my home for the next couple of years. I was straight coming out of Interlochen summer camp, and I was like, this has a weird similar feel to this, and I don't know why this is making me feel like this is where I want to be. But yeah, sometimes it's just a feeling.
Home is such a good word. Whether it's from the campus to the people, does this feel like the right place for me? What a thing that people are going to be doing. It's not like they're all going to be doing it this week either, Meghan. We know they got some weeks still. It's not until May 1st.
No, Lara does talk about it in this upcoming episode about, making decisions. So
it's a big thing.
It's a big thing.
So enjoy the episode with Lara Teeter from Webster. Well, we are honored to have Lara Teeter on the pod with us today. Lara has a BA from Oklahoma City University. He's been on Broadway in shows like Happy New Year, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, The Pirates of Penzance, and On Your Toes, for which he received a Tony Award nomination and an Outer Critics Circle Award. He's acted in places all over the country like the Muni. He's directed everywhere. He's taught everywhere, including Cal State University Fullerton, where he helped start the pilot program for the BFA in musical theater, Northwestern University, Shenandoah University, and now at Webster University, where he serves as the Associate Professor of Theater and Head of Musical Theater. Webster is located in St. Louis, Missouri. They take class sizes of about 20 students. They offer degrees in BFA Musical Theater, BFA Acting, BA Directing, and many other BFAs all over the theater world. Lara, how are you doing? Welcome on the pod.
I am doing really well today. It's so nice to have you in my presence.
It's pretty great to be in your presence, I'll say. And what a presence it is. Tell me a little bit before we dive too deep into Webster. I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of your background and how you got to this position. And maybe especially I'd love to hear a bit about your journey as head. So in terms of your experience of the past, since 2007 when you joined Webster, so till now.
Yeah, well, Cal State Long Beach was looking for a director choreographer for the opera program was looking for a director choreographer for West Side Story, and out of the 14 guys that auditioned, all 14 were cast. Only two of them had ever been near a dance room. So I had to take that wonderful score and simplify it and make the movement be about acting. And
Mm,
very dramatic story here, but I was on the opening night stage and telling the cast that I had found my true passion, which was to be a teacher.
mm,
And my journey with that show and having to simplify everything and really focus on the acting really felt like it was coming home. And then from there, I my resume went across the table. And I think this is important for the kids to hear because it was one of those stories of been there, done that. But I was there at the time when the AIDS epidemic took so many lives, so many of my friends, and I actually got my first job in the university because someone had passed away from AIDS, and so just kind of found myself in this environment while still managing to work in the profession
mm-hmm,
and then left after 7 years to go back out on the road with a big tour, and then came back to teaching at Northwestern, and then went on to Shenandoah Conservatory, where I found that that's where I felt I belonged, was in a
mm-hmm,
conservatory. And my wife and family and I had the opportunity to interview for Webster, and that was 15 years ago. And we've raised are in the currently raising four kids. Here, two have already graduated. They're in sophomores in college. Boy girl twins. Charlie and Elizabeth are sophomores in college, and then Catherine and Maggie are here in St. Louis finishing up school. And my wife teaches theater and dance next door at an all girls Catholic high school.
mm.
And there you have it. That's how I got to be here.
And Charlie and Elizabeth, you did not name your twins after me and my partner. Also, Charlie and Elizabeth.
Also, Charlie and Elizabeth. We did
It
not.
just happened to be
It
lucky.
just happened to be so lucky.
Well, I'd love to get into so now with this time, this 15 years that you've been at Webster. I'd love to talk a little bit. If you could sum up what you feel like a Webster student is, or what it has become, especially in the past 15 years, what would you say that student is? What kind of qualities do they share? If there is something we can distill down.
Someone who is curious, someone who is a storyteller, someone who uh, loves, understands, and can receive criticism, someone who can work hard, someone who shows up, and that's a big statement. Showing
Mm,
up meaning showing up not just on time, but showing up prepared and ready to work.
mm,
Someone who has devoted their life to a discipline, which can translate for their future in so many different ways, whether it's to go off and to become an attorney or to spend the rest of their lives in this business we call show.
mm-hmm,
So we really focus on the individual here at Conservatory, and yeah, I think that's what I would say to describe the Webster Conservatory student: somebody who is grounded in a balanced method of theater practice.
uh-huh. And imagining all those things are true, how am I going to come out changed? Let's say I show up as a freshman and I'm curious and I'm all those things that you just mentioned. Curricularly, what are you taking me through over those 4 years, and how am I going to come out with additional skills having gone through the program?
Well, that's a great question, and specifically to Webster, I will say that probably one of the number one reasons that students choose the Webster Conservatory possibly over another wonderful program is because they realize that if they come to study uh, getting a BFA in musical theater from the Sargent Conservatory of Theater Arts, they will be an actor first. So there is an 8-semester sequence to the 3 legs of the classical theater training stool, which is the acting, voice and speech, and movement. They're taking those 3 courses, 8-semester sequence, lockstep with the acting majors. And then in addition to that, they're taking their musical theater class in conservatory. And actually, one of my tasks over the last 15 years is to take the musical theater classes and line them up with the sequential values that happen from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4. So that's what they're going to come out a storyteller. We have actors who, for whatever reason, the majority of our acting majors can sing as well as our musical theater majors. They can take voice lessons and dance classes from the same teachers in a true liberal arts college sense of the word. And a perfect example, we just closed The Learned Ladies, which is a Moliere comedy piece, and three of the leads were musical theater majors. And then coming up, our musical will be Amelie, and the lead character Amelie is an acting major. So the musical theater majors are cast in plays, acting majors are cast in musicals. So and then I have 6 actors in my musical theater dance class, as well as 3 dance majors and 12 musical theater majors. So really, at the end of the day, if you put storytelling in the middle and all the ways we tell story, which is through the spoken word, through singing and dancing, all of the students in conservatory are able to be able to do that in some way.
I love it. And you've answered 3 of my questions with that one answer. You anticipated 2 of my future questions really beautifully. So imagining, so now you feel like more of a like storytelling focus or acting focus of a school. Talk me through a little bit the dance and singing in terms of, first, how does the dance work with stuff like levels, in terms of how you would take classes? And then tell me a little bit about what is the singing and music training that I would get as well?
Sure. Well, the Saturday before classes start on that following Monday, throughout the summer, if you've been accepted and you are coming to Webster, you'll get a form to fill out from the head of voice faculty, Martha Hart, who asks you about your previous vocal training and questions like, what kind of teacher do you prefer? Do you prefer a male teacher? Do you prefer a female teacher? Do you prefer a non-binary teacher? What do you prefer? And then we take that information, and the Saturday before classes start, all the musical theater students show up at the recital hall. All of the voice faculty are there, as well as the musical theater faculty, as well as the Department of Music chair and the head of voice faculty. We ask you to come in and sing a ballad. It's not about the fireworks. It's not about singing loud. It's just about, we want to hear your voice. And the faculty listen and place you with a teacher that they feel is going to help your weak area. Then we go to the dance room and the dance studio, and we, I'm dating myself, the dance room. We go to the dance studio, and we have a really fun warm-up and across the floor, and we teach a combination, and I sit in council with Department of Dance Chair Maggie Duker. And usually about 2 to 3 of our students level go into Ballet 2. That's usually what happens. Most of them will stick into Ballet 1. You only have enough room in your curriculum to take Ballet 1 in the first year. However, a lot of my freshmen, especially in the spring, will audit my musical theater dance class. And I certainly encourage that. And then by the time you get to your sophomore year, I don't know how they're able to do this, but I have a lot on paper. It looks like you're just going to take jazz and tap. But in fact, a lot of my students will go ahead and enroll in 4 dance classes. They'll maintain their ballet classes, they'll take jazz tap, and they'll stop by with musical theater dance. So they're taking anywhere between 12 and 15 dance classes a week. And that's just because they realize that that's something that they really need to be able to do, is to move well or to be a kick butt dancer. That's a great entry level for a lot of summer stock, as we all know.
And that sounds like it's a little bit optional for student to student, that I could take just the 2 dance classes if I don't feel I want.
Yeah. And again, there are certain dictates when you're getting a saturated degree like a BFA in musical theater, where to graduate from the university, it's 120 credits, and 116 of those are
Mm-hmm.
required for a BFA in musical theater because you're always in one of three departments. Um, but it is a liberal arts university. So we
Mm-hmm.
still have that ethos where you come to me and you want to take that many dance classes, we'll make it happen. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need more time to sleep or rest and you know yourself by the end of your first year, we're actually getting ready to register coming back from spring break in the next several weeks. That's a conversation, and we do everything we can to support your needs in
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Well, and perfect segue here as you talk about the liberal arts of the university. I'd love to talk about kind of outside of the theater program, obviously realizing it's a conservatory, so there's a lot of acting, singing, dancing training going on. But what do I get access to outside of the conservatory in terms of Webster as a broader university?
Yeah, I like that question. I'm going to be honest, it's a little bit of a catch-22 because one of the things we say in our opening company meeting is have a life, you
Mm-hmm.
know, get out there and have a life, and try to find those things outside of the theater that you might be passionate about. Um, but the truth is that's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also a mentor and advisor, right? So many times I will um, talk with the students about becoming involved in other activities. We do have, like a lot of schools, there are many different clubs that the school has. The reality of our students being able to participate fully in those clubs is
Mm-hmm.
non-realistic in a lot of ways because it's pretty much 24/7. Even though you're not performing in the first year, which is an additional 25 hours a week, right? Basically, when
Mm-hmm.
you're in rehearsals for a show, they do have their crew requirements, but we want them to be in studio to acquire and absorb the work. So there's a lot of journaling.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot, it's a lot more academic than you might think because of the text analysis and the worksheets that have to be turned in. So we also, you're away from home for the first time. You're learning how to adult, do laundry, fix food. So they don't perform the first year, but starting in the second year, you're into casting, and that's
Mm-hmm.
full on and full throttle. In addition, you're still doing your one crew a semester.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the second year acting class for us is I would call it more clinical. The first year is about exploring, about discovery, and about discovering your how you move through space, how you're breathing, where your tensions are,
Mm-hmm.
what it means to be a good actor in relationship. And the second year, there's a lot of analysis and a lot of who, what, why, where, when, a lot of prompt books, a lot of text analysis, and then the application of that. So it's a lot more academic in the second year on top of being cast.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think that's synonymous. I would guess, Charlie, with a lot of programs, right? That they're that second year is the big hump,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get into the third year and fourth year, and you're applying stuff more in the third year, and fourth year you're fine tuning. So
No doubt. But so you're saying in some ways, if I'm a parent of a student, especially, and I'm saying, oh, I'm going to go to Webster and I will get a double major, or I'll sneak that minor in, or that kind of thing. You're saying realistically that is going to be difficult.
yeah, and I'm quite honest when those kinds of questions continue to come up, like maybe the third or second time.
Mm-hmm.
If a parent or a student asks that question, I will say, there are some really excellent BA programs that
Mm-hmm.
you can go to still be able to participate in a really good theater program and have another major outside of it. But the conservatory, it's two analogies. One is like a 4-year boot camp,
Mm-hmm.
like a military boot camp where you come in falling down and I say, and now give me 200 more push-ups. But there's another analogy I use, which is training for the Olympics, right? You make the Olympic team when you get into this program, and then you have 4 years to train, and that's our senior showcase, which is happening this next week.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hoping to medal, right? Which in some cases is to get an agent, or
Mm-hmm.
or in some cases it's actually to right there on the spot they want you to go in for a
Mm-hmm.
show. 2 years ago, just before the world shut down, we had 3 students who got auditions for Hamilton as a result of the senior showcase, and
Mm-hmm.
that was scheduled for Friday, and everything shut down on Thursday. So, but they're still on the list. 2 years later, they're still on the list.
Heck yes.
So that is the Olympics, right? And
Yeah.
so Olympic athlete has to be aware of their, their sleep, their diet, their mindset,
Hmm.
right? There's just so much that goes into becoming that kind of an elite athlete. And I kind of approach conservatory in that same vein, actually.
Hmm. I love it. And I love how many athletics analogies you're making, even from like, it sounds like the beginning is like a combine, right? Where you're like seeing all the different skills and people are going, you're from my team. That's
Yeah,
really, I appreciate that. This podcast makes a lot of athletics metaphors as well. In our takeaways, we do a lot of
that's a slam
sports
dunk,
to
man.
theater. It's pretty
Let's
good.
knock it out of the
Um,
park.
Let's wrap up this section with, I always like to ask professors when they have those conversations like you're having with those parents and saying, maybe there may be another school for you. When they find that a student chooses not to go to Webster, let's say they have a bunch of great options, like a lot of our students have great options right now, and they're narrowing them down and trying to make decisions. Why do you find that they say, here's why I'm going to go in this different direction as opposed to going to Webster?
I love this question. When our acceptances go out, and they're actually going out probably as you and I are having this podcast, the acceptances are going out. But I've already reached out to those students so they know they're accepted. I always put into that email that I want you to understand that should you choose not to come to Webster, I will still do a cartwheel and support you in every which way, because number one, you found the place that you feel is right for you, but also you'll be done with this long process, all the preparation, all the auditions. Now you've made a choice and you're going to go to a school that you've done your research, you've been thorough. Perhaps you visited Webster, but then you went and looked at Vicki Bussert's wonderful program at Baldwin Wallace, and you've chosen that. I think Baldwin Wallace is where I want to be. I couldn't be happier for you, because we've made our decision, but it's not our decision. It's our turn to wait. It's the student's decision. So I make it very clear to the parents and the students. And when I do get those emails that say, unfortunately, we're not going to be coming to Webster, thank you very much, but we're going to be going elsewhere, I always respond with, I'm so excited for you. Congratulations. I really want the parents and students to know that we are very supportive and that we're honored that we were part of their college audition process, because looking at Webster helped them get
Hmm.
into a pipeline of the things. I'm sure there were things probably, hopefully, about Webster that they really, really like, but then they take those and they look at this other program, and maybe it could be just simple as topography.
Hmm.
Sometimes people want to go to Pace or Marymount Manhattan and be stimulated by the energy of New York City, where their
Hmm.
dream is just 20 or 30 or 40 blocks up or downtown from wherever they're going to school. Maybe
Hmm.
they want to go to University of Oklahoma, where football is big, or Indiana, where they're going to be going to basketball games, or Michigan, where they're going to paint their faces blue and have that college experience. I don't want to take that away from them. If they're going to
Hmm.
come to Webster, it's tucked away in this little midwestern community, and you can walk 2 or 3 minutes either any direction, and you're into the suburbs, right? And
Hmm.
so that might be very appealing to some students, and to some students, maybe they love the curriculum, they just don't want to be in this kind of environment. So there's like 7 things that they have to consider for each of the schools, right?
It's so true. And it's, I'll say, as someone who helps these students, it is really appreciated that you do write those emails and say, I support you, as opposed to saying, no, you should come to us, or what, you're right. The students have the power for the first time after maybe sometimes 2 years of this process, saying, please take me, please take me. Now they actually have the moment where they get to go, I get to make a choice. And it is very uncomfortable for them. You can tell they really feel uncomfortable saying no to someone who they wanted so badly to say yes to them. And just that little bit of release, I know, means a lot to those students to know this
Yeah,
person's still in your corner.
yeah, and I'm a parent, and I usually tell them, I have 4 kids, and I want for you what I want for my own 4 kids, which is to find the place that's right for you.
Hmm.
So I usually say, okay, I got my dad hat on now. I'm going to say this thing, and then I say I'm going to put my Webster hat on now.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I do value the process that these parents, and I value people like yourself, Charlie, that do such an incredibly great job at mentoring these kids and helping them do the best they can possibly do in these auditions. Um, Yeah, it's a heck of a process, and it's one, I'll say it again, it's one that I really feel very honored to be part of. That these kids and families are deciding to devote their lives to a fine art. I mean,
Mm.
what? That takes a lot of love and support and courage, and I'm happy to be part of it.
A great place to end. We'll do a cue to a short little break, and on the back end of the break, we'll chat a little bit about the audition process for Webster.
Can't wait.
All right, we are back with the great Lara Teeter. In short, I'd love to talk about the audition process, and I know this is a really complicated answer, but if there's a tidbit about kind of what you feel like makes a great audition for you, what you really look for when you see a student in person.
Konstantin Stanislavski said something that I realized after many years. I kept talking about this process, and somebody mentioned this maybe 3 years ago, and I went, "That's it." And his quote was, "Learn to love the art in yourself rather than yourself in the art."
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me that that's one of the things that we look for. When you first come into the audition, we call you over to the table and we sit down and we ask you questions and we get to know you. And I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that what we're doing is getting your breath to drop. We're getting you to realize that we're just human,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just there to support you and want you to feel comfortable. And then at some point, I'll say, "So, what are your pieces?" And they just, give them the pieces, and I say, "Well, why don't we just do them?" And they get up, and sometimes they'll ask, "Do I need to slate?" And I said, "No, you've already done that. Just
Mm-hmm.
take your time and do your work." And then they do their pieces. Sometimes we give an adjustment, sometimes we don't. And I know they've heard this before, but sometimes we really have seen everything we need to see,
Mm-hmm.
especially if we're on a clock and we need to move on.
Mm-hmm.
But we do love to give adjustments, because in that adjustment, if a student is able to take an adjustment, it's very telling. If they're
Mm-hmm.
set in their ways and they're hard to move off of a particular thing they've practiced, that's very telling to us. And it
Mm-hmm.
sounds kind of cruel, actually, as I'm saying in this moment, but those are things that we can't really know or take a risk on if they're not able to move or budge. So it's the interview, it's the adjustment, it's the person, that we are really looking for a person who loves the art in themselves. It's like, this is something I can't deny. It just has to come out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I also say, Charlie, about the other, which is the student that loves themselves in the art. I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a sense of confidence. There's a sense of, I'm going to come in, I'm going to hit my mark, and I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to deliver the goods. And I'm saying all the right things. And, this is a clean, solid audition, because quite frankly, you and I both know that some programs, that's what they want to
Uh-huh.
see. They don't want to get to know you right now. They just want to get an essence of you. Very much like auditioning for Telsey in New York, right? They're not going to sit down and talk to you. They want you to walk in and deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And so nothing wrong with that at all. But I feel like the person, the kid, and their desire to be curious is really important for us. Also, I always ask why Webster, and if it's a walk-in, that's not a problem. But if
Mm-hmm.
a student is really interested and invested in Webster, and I know you coach this, Charlie, I know you do. You know who you're auditioning for, know the program before you walk in. It's really important, kids, if you're listening, and parents, even you don't have to like spend an hour, but like, even if it's just before you walk in, open up the website, look at a couple of key things that catch your eye. That's all it takes. You don't have to have the whole curriculum memorized. That's kind of there's no perfect science, right? We're just looking
For
for
sure.
someone we feel is going to thrive and prosper in what we have to offer. We know more about that than the students do themselves. So they're just kind of coming in blind, and we're asking them questions. Some of the questions we ask are obviously why Webster, but also, what else are you interested in
Mm-hmm.
outside of the arts? Uh, is there something you'd like us to know about yourself or share about yourself that we can't necessarily see in your pieces
Mm-hmm.
or on the resume here? Just trying to get them to open up and talk about themselves.
And Other than that kind of inflexibility, which can be a bit of a red flag, is there anything else that you sort of see in auditions that you'd say, this would be a red flag, or this would be a pet peeve, or something that turns me off if I see this in a student's audition?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And I'm going to just really think about that to make sure I'm not just giving you a good answer.
I'm
Um,
okay with a good answer.
I like what you just said about red flags, right? Red flags that I always refer to. I don't know if you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink. Mal-
Absolutely. I teach it all the time when I'm talking about
okay,
your first
okay.
impressions. Yeah.
Well, for those of you who don't know, blink, as you can tell from the title, is that we have these blink moments where we just know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I always use the thing. You can be standing in Starbucks, and you might say one thing to somebody standing in line, and you realize that you could probably become fast friends with them. They're just
Uh-huh.
something that you make a comment, and they make a repartee, and you kind of have a moment. Or the other is true, like you steer clear, and so
Mm-hmm.
an audition is a blink moment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just that moment where what is a red flag? Well, I'm sure that Megan, who thank you, Megan, for being here and taking care of Charlie and I in this interview, but Megan, Charlie, myself, anyone who's listening, you have your own list of red flags, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it could be any number of things. It could be um, something that is said, or if a person is walking in, or here's a couple of them. If I'm ushering somebody in, I'm monitoring, I'm like the monitor and I'm walking them in and I'm saying, how's your day going? And they start with, oh, I'm just really
Mm-hmm.
tired. Or they say, well, I hope this audition is better than my last audition. That's a red flag.
Yeah. You're like, I'm
You
so
know?
sorry I made you come in here. I'm so sorry that I forced you to do this audition.
Exactly. But again, I don't hold it against the student, because a lot of times I feel like they don't know what they don't know, right? In that
Mm-hmm.
moment, I don't hold it against them. I quite honestly hold either the parent or the teacher or the college prep person, no offense, but I
Not
kind of
taken?
like, I kind of feel like somebody has not guided this. So
Mm-hmm.
interesting about those moments. I actually go the other direction when those red flags come up. I actually try to see a little bit of light. I
Mm-hmm.
try to steer the conversation, or I try to see if they take the bait. But more times than not, they don't. They're already stuck in their funk, and you know, life is too precious for us in conservatory. So ensemble and the ability to be supportive of one another is really important
Mm-hmm.
to us. Another red flag is if they make the pieces about them as opposed to the person they're trying to affect in the monologue or
Mm-hmm.
trying to affect in the song. But that usually comes through in an adjustment,
Mm-hmm.
where we, ask the questions that you teach them, which is who are you
Mm-hmm.
singing to and why? What's the beat before?
Mm-hmm.
So
And how are these answers? That's some really wonderful answers about the audition process. How has that changed in terms of what you're looking for with a pre-screen audition, right? Because if I understand, you guys don't require pre-screens, but do accept them, so they can send them in. What you're looking for from the pre-screen audition, how does that change from maybe what you're looking for in a live
well,
audition?
it's the same. I mean, we all self tapes are never going to go away. These idea of uploading these things are never going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing about those kinds of moments is that you can redo them if there's a mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought this up, because it's so much a part of the culture now. Is that I can see very clearly the minute the person introduces themselves that they are either doing one of two things. They're doing this as an assignment, meaning this is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm supposed to be doing, or they're seizing an opportunity to establish a relationship. Um, and I say this in class too. It's like, we'll finish like an all skate of doing whatever, like a golden age ballads, right? Which we're
Mm-hmm.
getting ready to do this Friday. It's like, and I'll ask the question of, did you do this? How many of you did this as an assignment, or how many of you did this as an opportunity to grow?
Mm-hmm.
It's like busted. Yeah, I did what I was told I was supposed to do. So that first moment where I see a student up on that screen is the same. They're in the room, right? They're in a room. It's just a virtual room, but it's so whatever they can do to make eye contact with that camera, and whether I don't know what their imagination can possibly do. It's a skill, right? Auditioning, that's why we're here, right? Auditioning, this is why you do what you do. Auditioning is a skill. You can be a great singer, you can be a great actor, but if you can't be in a room and audition, it's not good. It's gonna you're spending your life doing this is your job. I've often tell my students to get business cards that says, professional auditioner. That's your job. That's what you
So
do.
true. It's so true. I was thinking about that the other day. I was helping my partner with a self-tape, and the work was great. Everything about the scene worked. And the note I gave her, which is like the worst note you can ever give a human being, is like,
Oh,
can we do that again? But like, I think because this is like a TV sitcom, I think I need to like you. Like I was like, I didn't really seem like I liked you too much. And which is a terrible note. I mean, I would only give that to a partner, never to a student. She took the note beautifully. Like there was a difference about her being able to go, so let me do it in a way that like I'm introducing myself to these people. I was like, the sardonic humor, all of that's working. It just feels like I don't like you in this take. And then in this take, I like you, which
yeah, that's a
again,
great note, actually. That's a great note. I want
if,
to
if
like
all
you.
17-year-olds can turn that on in the room to say, I'm going to make Lara like me, that's
Well, and
not quite that easy.
here's the truth, and this is true at Telsey, just as it's true for you and your partner, and it's just as it's true for Webster. I have a problem. I'm sitting
Right.
behind a desk. I have a problem. I have the class of 2026 that I have to go find. I want you to come in and solve my problem.
Mm-hmm.
Walk in and say, I'm exactly what you're looking for, because I've done my research and I know a couple of people who are actually in your program, and these are the
Mm-hmm.
things they tell me about the program, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a great fit.
Mm-hmm. If you had to estimate for you how much of the decision is based on the kind of skill displayed within the material versus those intangibles, the interview questions, the adjustments, does it feel like it leans more heavily in one direction or the other in terms of like what will get an artistic yes from you? Is it about the first or the second or some combination of the two?
Oh man, that's a really excellent question. I I'm actually going to say in this moment, I think it's the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Here's what I'll tell you: the long and short list that we start out with, which is basically, out of the hundreds that we see, it's the long short list I call it, which is something about this person that we feel could thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And in that long and short list, it actually is two piles. It's the yes, maybe, and the yes.
Mm-hmm.
The yeses are those that click all the boxes. The interview
Mm-hmm.
is great. The vocals are great. They take great adjustments. It's like, this is how to build a program. But the yes maybes,
Mm-hmm.
maybe vocally they're a little under, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe their acting is okay, but then they really run with the adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes in my book, I have this big heart I draw. It's like I love I love this person so much
Mm-hmm.
that I can't say no to them right now, because there's something about them that is like a really excellent student. And that's what we want. Yes, we want talent, but we really, above and beyond that, love this question, Charlie, really good. Above and beyond that, we really want an excellent student.
And so that would override if there was a vocal issue, if there was something you go, I just need this person because of the human
Yes.
being they are for you.
Yeah, and I would say that the accept list right now that we have, there are a couple of yes maybes on that list.
Uh-huh.
Means that there were yeses
Uh-huh.
that clicked all the boxes, but the
Uh-huh.
yes maybes just because of, and sometimes I couldn't even tell you why. It's just I
But
have
a
a gut.
powerful enough force that you
Yeah,
go, this overrode. That's a really cool.
yeah,
And then what about, you mentioned from the teaching perspective, more acting would be the number one of the three legs of the stool for you.
yes, very much
From
so.
as you're evaluating as an auditioner, is it also the number one thing you're looking for, or how does it evaluate acting versus singing versus dance? And if I'm maybe not quite as strong in one of the categories, is it a holistic score, or do I drop one of the disciplines, or how does that work for you?
Well, I'll put it to you this way, and particularly in Chicago, when we have two rooms running, right, the acting room and the musical theater room, and there's a waiting room there in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago. And so someone comes in, and let's say that the acting room has an much more open schedule, which is usually the case than
Mm-hmm.
our room, right? And the minute the person sits down, the minute they open their mouth to sing a song, I'll say, I want to hold a second because I want you to meet our acting faculty,
Mm-hmm.
and I want them to work with you and your monologues. I could listen. I could definitely do them and make a decision there, but
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, I really like sending them to the acting faculty. And then this is what happens at lunch. We sit down and we say, we really love this person. What did you think? And they go, absolutely. The sweet spot is what they say. Well, if you don't want them for musical theater, they've applied for both acting and musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take them for acting.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much they like them. But if then there's two other answers they'll give. They'll say, okay, right? That their
Mm-hmm.
acting skill is, if you really like them for musical theater, we'll say okay. Then the other one is, could not get an adjustment out of them,
Mm-hmm.
could not, I didn't feel this energy that you felt from them. Those people will, more often than not, now there are rare cases we'll hold on to, but more often than not, they'll fall off the list because they
Uh-huh.
can't take that acting adjustment.
I was sure when you began that story that somehow the waiting room was going to be the most important of the rooms. I had
Well, it
acting room,
is.
musical theater room, and I was like, what's he going to say about the waiting room? You
Let
cued
me
it so
talk.
well. I was
Can I
like,
talk about the wait? May I?
please do.
Okay, love the waiting room because you go in and you see people waiting, and there's, the parents are there sometimes, very telling, right? Very telling.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll give an example. One time we came in and the dad was sitting there while the daughter was fixing her getting herself ready for the audition, and he was filling out all her forms for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells a story, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
story did not change when she came into the room.
Mm-hmm.
Very talented, very, very talented. But and then there's a student that will sit and wait for an extra 45 minutes because suddenly we get behind and there's two people that have another audition to go for. And they're sitting there and they say, no problem. I'll
Mm-hmm.
wait. No, they need to go. They need to catch a plane. They can go before me. Right. So before they've even come in the room, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell them that, I'll go up and say, thank you so much. Come on in. We already love you because you're so gracious. And, that kind of a person who is supportive
Mm-hmm.
of the room. And then, there's the energy suckers, that sometimes the person signing it in, they'll knock on our door and come in and say, this kid and the mom is driving me nuts.
Yep.
And we just say, got it. No problem. Gotcha. And man, if this isn't how the business works, Charlie, right? I mean, this is
It
how the
so
business
does.
works.
Yep.
So,
And I always feel my heart goes out to them when it's
me
maybe the
too.
parent, but not the student. When you go, oh God, that if
Me
this the
too.
parent is going to weigh more heavily on you, and it's really not your fault. But yes, of course that can be how it works.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a real thing. The waiting room is a
Yep.
real thing.
But so let's imagine I've gotten yes. I've gotten an artistic yes from acting from the musical theater room. The waiting room was fantastic for me. So everything's working from my audition perspective. What needs to now pass the Webster University portal for it all in terms of what do I need in terms of, is there anything grades, SAT wise? How does that factor in? If you artistically say the yes, how does
Yeah,
that then work with actually being accepted?
I'll compare us to someplace, and I think it's maybe Elon or Ithaca, where they're great. They're just to get into the university, you have to have something like a 3.7 or 3.8,
Mm-hmm.
which I know the people in those programs, it's awful for them in so many ways because sometimes they just can't get a student because they don't make the grade. For us, it's not that big of a deal. I think it's something like 2.5. So it's most of the people who come to Webster University are within a 3 zip code radius,
Mm-hmm.
except for conservatory, and we're from all over, not just the United States, but this
Mm-hmm.
last year, thanks to virtual auditions, we have someone from Colombia and someone from Peru. So we were able to bring in that inclusion diversity into our program, which has been very exciting for us.
So cool.
Yeah.
And when that leads me perfectly to my last little wrap up couple questions here. I want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the challenges of 2022 and beyond in terms of kind of where we are in this
Yeah.
world, and talk a little bit about the adjustments that you have made over the past couple of years in terms of both those discussions around equity and inclusion and some of the demands for racial equity that came up, especially in 2020, but then also just some of these challenges of a virtual world in terms of how things have shifted since all those 10 years ago when the pandemic began. So I take it whatever direction you want to go in there, but I'd love to hear a little bit how you've adjusted in the past couple of years.
I love this question, and it's one that I'm more than happy to talk about. There are two things that take center stage in conservatory right now. Number one is wellness. All of us listening in on this podcast right now, and all you parents and all you students understand that our culture is under a lot right now. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of medication, a lot of stress, a lot of worry. And a lot of it is due to, the the phone and Instagram and all that kinds of stuff. The other thing is in 2020, the fall of 2020, like many programs, our AOCC Actors of Color Coalition, which was made up of both the alumni and the current students on both the technical and performance side, submitted a petition to the conservatory. And our dean and chair lovingly responded, "Thank you." And it was basically calling us to task, calling us out in terms of not being an anti-racist theater company. So over the last 2 years, we have worked really hard with our alumni and with our current student population. And we are every day working hard to become an anti-racist theater company. And what does that mean? That means we're making changes in curriculum, we're making changes in material, we're making changes in season selection. And so we were hoping to present to the conservatory a new mission statement and an anti-racist theater ethos this last fall. But during the meetings, we kept coming around to the same questions. Well, what do you think the students would think about this? And some people would say, I think the students would appreciate this statement. But then we always circled back, but we can't speak for them. So we scrapped that idea and we came in and made it voluntary. I'm part of this for faculty, and the students could volunteer to be part of a year-long process whereby we would rewrite the mission statement and create an anti-racist theater ethos. We just had one of our meetings the other day. And it is inspiring to see the direction that we're going. We've got a long way to go, but we're working really hard at becoming an anti-racist theater. And we're, in order to do that, what we did for the musical theater side of things, the acting was a different situation, but for musical theater this year, we did something we've never done before, which is that we did rolling admissions, meaning that we made offers to people on the spot this year for the first time ever. And we made a decision for musical theater in order to do that, that those early spots needed to be reserved for our BIPOC community, our Black, Indigenous, people of color. Now, there were many Caucasian talented people that we wanted to jump across the desk and make those offers to, but we reserved it for that community. And as a result, 3 people have already said yes before the letters are just about to go out, because it gave them a chance to be done with their process. They knew they were really seriously considering Webster. Some of them were actually able to book an early visit, right, to come and see us and then to say yes. And we still have those that are out, and we're giving them the time they need to make those decisions. But that's all part of everything we're doing. We're not leaving any stone unturned in terms of what can we do to become more diverse and more inclusionary.
Beautifully said. And then if you want to talk a little bit about the virtual world and how you've pivoted and now maybe are beginning the pivot back, or, 2020/2021, of course, was had a lot of hybridity and virtualness to it. And so what has stayed from that and what is going to continue forward with you, if anything, in terms of like kind of lessons from that time?
Yeah, we went ahead and added a virtual day to our auditions this year. We tried to make sure that it was filled with people who, in no way, shape, or form, could either see us on campus in New York,
Mm-hmm.
in LA, or in Chicago. And so if it was just working out because of Omicron, kind of did nasty things to
Oof.
people's plans, right?
Yep.
And speaking of that, we were able to, in all of those places, both on campus in New York, Chicago, LA, we had our laptops with us. And
Mm-hmm.
so throughout the day in Chicago, for instance, very often we had 3 to 5 virtual auditions. They kept their same time
Yep.
at the Unifieds, but we opened up our computers and met them. And many of them actually are on, as it turns out, quite a few are on our accept list. So
Mm-hmm.
those worked out really well for us. So yes, this is not going away.
Mm-hmm.
We all know it. I mean, the in-room skills will always be there too. That's not going to go away. But I mean, any of these casting offices right now, and our students are going to do with their senior showcase this next week. They all have their website up and running.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be part of their packets when they do their showcase. So if the agents or casting directors need to see anything else, they just have to go on and make clicks, and they can see everything they need to see, whether it's their dance ability or their film work or their scene work or their songs.
It's so true. We may regret, or we may wish some parts of it would go away, and we wouldn't have to do so many self tapes. But certainly, from a convenience perspective, that's not going anywhere. I mean,
That's
it's
it. And
too.
most of the students I talked to didn't mind it. They realized that there was a comfort kind of sitting in their little setup in their homes where
Mm-hmm.
it caused a sense of comfort and ease for them in many cases where they thought, I'd say, how's it going? How's all the, actually, this is going great for me.
A
Not
sign of
everybody
being
feels that
young.
way.
Comfort is not how it feels for me. I go, oh God, there's so much to set up, and oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
I love to wrap with, especially speaking to maybe a young student who's either maybe beginning their process if they're a sophomore or junior right now, or maybe they're a senior, kind of wrapping up their process. Is there any kind of perspective advice that you want to give to one of those students as they kind of look at Webster and as they look at sort of their process as a whole?
I would say live with the question. Don't feel like that you have to come up with an answer until you're ready to come up with an answer. I would also say be careful with getting caught up in the zeitgeist of everything. It's like, oh, this program, oh, you got to do this or you got to do that. You know, Sit down with your family if you can and talk about what you want, what you're looking for, what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think, and I'm sure Charlie, again, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I get it, right? The parents do need to talk to each other because they feel like they don't know what they're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell parents it's pretty simple. You just love, feed them, and make sure they get their rest and stay academically solvent. Stay
Mm-hmm.
academically disciplined. Don't they don't need to be doing every show. They need to be like getting rest, especially approaching their fall semester of your senior year.
Mm-hmm.
Just take a step back and give yourself a little grace. And I always tell people to go sit under a tree. And what that means is stop your mind and just
Mm-hmm.
kind of smell the roses and gently make a list of pros and cons and let the answer come. Don't feel like you have to force it. You have till May 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be honest, and my admissions office probably won't like me saying this on this podcast, but if a student is accepted into Webster and they don't let us know by May 1st, and sometime in July or August they come back and say, I feel like I made a mistake and I would hope that I can still be accepted into Webster, we're going to say you're coming. We're not going to turn them down. We gave you a letter, and just
Mm-hmm.
because you missed the deadline doesn't mean we're going to shut the door.
Well, we appreciate that.
Don't
We're
tell
going to cut
anybody I
that
said that.
bleep. There's be one when you hear one loud bleep in the pod, we'll know what that. No, but not unique in terms of that the porous membrane of that May 1st, especially as waitlist happened late and all those things. That it
Sure.
feels so momentous, but of course they're people. It's a people business. So if it is someone to
That's it.
say, I made this mistake, this was the right place for me, of course.
Yeah.
That was great advice. I love the idea of sitting under a tree, especially if you're not going to Instagram the moment. That's what's tough is you get into nature and you need to jump on the phone. But if you actually can sit and not be on the phone, it's a positive thing.
Yeah, stillness is an important. Stillness is the most important movement, and silence is the most important sound. I feel.
Mm. Well, not a better way to end the pod than that.
I
I got to
shut it
say,
up.
thank you so much, Lara. This was such a pleasure to get a chat with you.
My pleasure.
Hey now, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Lara as much as I did. He is such a warm and generous spirit of a man, and I thought so clear and insightful about his program and this process. I also really appreciated getting to chat about his children a bit off the air. Congrats to his daughter, who's joining the Broadway cast of Beetlejuice. Very excited.
Woo!
And it really kind of solidified some of that like aspirational dad vibes, which I didn't realize I'd already kind of been like, oh, I'm kind of jealous of his dad vibes, but now I'm even more so as we got to talk about his kids. Um, there's so much great stuff to dive in here, some of which we've done before. So I love the idea, if you haven't listened to Ethan Slater's episode, of are you doing it as an assignment or as an opportunity for growth? We talk about that a lot. We talk about the concept of learning for yourself that Ethan brings on. Similarly, I think you will be shocked that I don't take the opportunity to chat more about the Olympics, even though that is a metaphor we often make. And this podcast does not often pass up an opportunity to make a sports analogy. But I landed on doing a deeper dive into this idea of intangibles, especially as they're seen in some of the interstitial parts of an audition that go beyond the material itself, since I thought Lara talked so candidly and beautifully about how important they are for him in an audition room. And you hear we ask every faculty member, not for everybody is it the most important thing. So people talk about different amounts, and you can't hold them to whatever percentage they say exactly in on the spot. But we've talked about some of these aspects in previous episodes, especially in relationship to adjustments and how important adjustments are when you're given them, and kind of what the schools might be looking for there. But I thought this would be a good opportunity just to define what we mean by all those different parts of an audition. When we talk about what happens in an audition room that goes beyond just the material, this is what we're going to talk about. So this is by no means comprehensive or definitive, but this is how I like to break down a college audition into about 7 parts. The first part being the entrance/intro, and I'm putting that together into one thing, the entrance and intro. The second is the slate. The third is prep. The fourth is work. The fifth is interview. The sixth is adjustment. And the seventh is like exit/conclusion. And now almost all of those parts can move around in where they happen in the audition room, but in many auditions, a lot of them will happen. Not necessarily all 7. To Lara's point, you don't always get an adjustment. You almost always will get some interview, as far as interview means talking to you in some way, will almost always happen. And basically all the other things will happen in every audition, but sometimes they'll happen in different order. So let's go into those a little bit more specifically. That entrance/intro, for me, that's what we're talking about with the blink moment, right? Can you take a second to say hello and bring your actual self into the room, and maybe even go beyond, not just introducing yourself to the auditors and kind of presenting yourself, but actually take a moment to meet them too? Just like what you'll ideally do in the interview, and this really is all part of the interview when you think about how you introduce yourself, it should be a reciprocal process. It should be that both I'm speaking and also listening in the experience. It sounds weird to say listening when you're introducing yourselves, but really listening to the other people behind the table and really meeting them. It's so important, and I know we've hit a bit of this before, that in your intro, you choose to enter the room and bring yourself in and not be brought in by someone else saying it's time. Of course, literally you're brought in the room by someone else saying it's your time. But for you to choose, I'm stepping into this room, and that first blink moment, some of the what might interrupt a positive blink could be because you are in that negative space worrying about your previous audition, or you are so nervous that you don't feel like you're ready to actually start, as opposed to saying, I'm actually walking in, and here I'm going to take a moment to really introduce myself. That will help you get that higher percentage of positive blinkitude. Blinkitude's a weird word. Then that's slate. And now the biggest thing I'll say about slate here, as in terms of mistakes that I see, is that this slate should be divorced from your intro, meaning it is not the same thing to introduce yourself and to slate your pieces. Slate just means, for those of you who don't know that before, saying, here's the pieces I'll be working on. Often it's, I'll start with this song, and that might be all you say. Sometimes they'll ask you, what are you going to do for me today? And you might list both songs. You might list both songs and all your monologues if it's a room where you're doing both. So it's not to say that those two things could never happen together, where you would introduce yourself and then you would slate. Often they'll tell you outside the room if that is going to happen. They'll say, hey, you're going to go in and just, when you're there, introduce yourself, slate, and jump right in, right? They may just say slate and jump right in, and they'll be looping in the introduction into that slate. But even if you're given that cue, even if there is no gap, trying to find how to say, not to say, I'm Charlie Murphy and my first piece will be, as if that's the sort of one sentence. Just even if only the 3 words are, I'm Charlie Murphy, to take the second to really say that. And then you'll go on and say, my first song is, and you'll get to do that. But there are two very separate events happening there. One is the most important thing you do in the room, which is introduce yourself, right? I'm meeting this person. And the other is talking about some work that you prepared. And those two things are not together, even if they happen to happen one after another. And as Lara mentioned, if you've already done one or the other, you'll look very confident in the audition room. If you don't, then do it again. If you've been talking and I've already said, my name is Charlie, I don't need to walk up now and go, hi, I'm Charlie, right? We've done that already. And similarly with the slate, if they've already fully introduced the piece, you've done that before the room, you don't then need to fully reintroduce it again in the way that you do that. Again, those are some little confidence bullet points you can pick up. The third thing being prep. We'll talk about prep a little bit more in future episodes for sure. Just important to remember to do it, that it's not slate and then work. There is that moment for you to collect yourself, bring all that great, intelligent work you've been doing in your pieces before you actually do your pieces. The fourth is the work itself, whether it's 2 songs, 2 monologues, whatever the room is. It might be one or the other. It might be one of each. Notice it's only one of 7 different things that happen in the room. Is it the most important of the 7? Unquestionably so. Not for every person. Lara said maybe interview is even more important, but for most people, the work it's very important. The monologues and songs, you've been working on these for a long period of time. But notice it's just part of what happens. It's not all that happens. And then the interview, as we mentioned, Lara said that can happen before. Some schools like to talk before you even start. Some will do a little bit of both. They may chat with you a bit and then do a little more formal interview after. Some, there's very little. Sometimes it's only casual. Sometimes they'll take you to a separate room and do a formal sit-down interview. That's the exception, not the rule, but that does happen where it's more of that formal college interview. For the most part in this process, it's normally not so formal as what you would think of as a standard college interview in terms of like, let me pose you a question and give me an essay answer. It is normally more of a back and forth chat, even if there are real questions. They want it to feel like it's conversational. They want to really get to know you and the way Lara was talking about. And to me, I count all of that chat as interview. So like I've had students before who tell me like, oh God, I was in there for 10 minutes, but they didn't do any interview. I was like, well, what did you do? You just kept doing the monologue? They're like, no, we just like chatted for 5 minutes. We didn't do any interview questions. I'm like, no, that is it. That's it. You've done the interview questions. That's what this thing is, right? And often that is, it wants to be more casual for them rather than a series of a lot of questions of why Webster, why this? If it goes off into a tangent and you're just chit-chatting, you're doing a lot of things right. And then we talked about adjustments in previous. Those also could not happen at all, could happen at different times if they were to stop and start you between your pieces before you move on. And we talked about that a little bit more. And the exit/conclusion, we'll talk about that more too in different episodes. But just important to end the audition in the way that you've begun. Choosing to enter and then choosing to exit, of course, is important. And of course, leave when they're done with you. If they dismiss you, you never want to be the person who's like, oh, wait, okay, so I just have like one more thing. I could try it again. I'll bet I could do it better. You're like, okay, they're done. It's time to move on. To be clear with all of that, I'm sure much of that was not processed by people as you're listening. If you're just starting this process, you should not feel like you're an expert on any of those things. This is a really difficult and incredibly specific process and different than other kinds of auditions where you're auditioning for parts. But when we talk about those audition skills, which Lara really defined this auditioning as a skill, and I agree, this is what we mean. It's working on the non-material parts of your audition, as well as the ability to psychologically bring yourself into a place, with help from that prep, that third one, where you can present your material to the best of your ability. This skill is the difference, if I'm going to make a little sports metaphor, of practice versus a game, right? A lot of people can do the skills and the technique within throwing a football, but then when a bunch of people are running at them, I'm making more football, not less basketball for Meghan. When the people are running at them, it's harder, right? The nerves are higher, and now all of a sudden, that throw that I made perfectly into a tire, I'm not making, on the move in the middle of the game. But the more confidence you can have in these stages and in how you're gonna interact with and encounter all of these stages, it will enable you to be more confident and more comfortable in the room so that you can do your best work. And when it gets time for the work, that you're gonna go, cool, this is the part that I'm really excited about. We see it all the time in like our mock auditions where students who are really prepared with the monologues and songs, they really were ready. They get thrown off enough by what happens in the intro and the slate and how they're chatting that then they're in their heads and they're not doing their best work. We want you to feel really prepared and really confident in what all those little interstitial stages are so that you can actually do your best work. Well, if you feel we've done our best work, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Also, if you hear my child shouting in the background, give some love. She's giving you love. We're going to give you love right back. We would also appreciate you if you were to rate and review us wherever you found us. I suggest 5 stars if you do a cartwheel when someone says no to you, and an ironic 5 stars if you do an ironic cartwheel in those instances. You can also reach out to us with questions for the pod at mailbag@mappingcollegeaudition.com, or reach out to Meghan and me directly and grace us with a follow. I'm at Charmer7. She's at Meghan Marie 2014. If you're interested in working with MTCA for help with your individual prep for your college audition journey, please check us out at mtca.nyc. You can also follow us with at Musical Theater College Auditions on Instagram, at TweetMTCA on Twitter. And if you want to see our faces, check out some of our mini episodes as well as our full-length audio episodes on YouTube by searching for Mapping the College Audition. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, seize the opportunity to sit under a tree for yourself and not just because someone told you to. We'll see you next week.